This is That One Audition with Alicia Oxy.
Here we are. So excited. No, actually, I'm really excited. I did not know you were from Texas. So first, I need to know how a Texas girl finds her way to Los Angeles and starts doing this.
I grew up in Dallas, and I guess I always just wanted to grow up, and I wanted a car when I was like 13. I wanted to go on. And I was bored in school, and there was this program where you would go 2 years early to college, like you would skip your last 2 years of high school, and you would go early, but it was all for math and science, which was not what I was interested in, but I was good at the time. And I had been like invited to apply because I took my SATs in 7th grade. So they do this thing so they can track you. And I decided to apply like last minute just because I had moved schools and I didn't really want to be there. And I got in. So I went there when I was 16 it's on the UNT campus. It's a program within that called Texas Academy of Math and Science, which now has an arts program. And I am so jealous because at the time it was just like advanced college math and science classes. And I really, I didn't have any study ethic because I never had to study before that. And I did terribly and I didn't go to class. But anyways, I was also buying for a clothing store in Texas that I had worked at when I was 15. So I was traveling to LA like once a month. And I was like, I'd like to move to LA. And so I decided to actually make the leap with the encouragement of the academic advisor at the program, who I used to have to see like once a week because my grades were below a 3.0. And he encouraged me to do it. He was like, look, you're already so far ahead. You can always go back to school. You're going to have your first year of college done at 17. So if this is something you want to try, if you want to try the acting thing, go try it. He was like, I believe in you. And nobody else said that. My family was very upset because I was on the scholarship to go to this thing that you could go then to like any like Ivy League school afterwards on scholarship. It was this big thing to get into.
Yes.
And yeah, Dr. Donahue.
Did you need to have, since you were 17 at the time, did you need to have your parents' permission? How did you get to go? Yeah.
No, I just
went.
Yeah, I don't know where I would turn in a permission slip in Los Angeles.
That's the thing. I didn't know if they were like, especially at 17, your parents could probably take action. But if that's what you were going and that's what you were doing, I just am so impressed. I don't think I ever knew that because you and I know each other. So then you came to LA at 17?
Yeah, I was 17. It was a few months before I turned 18, I think. But yeah.
Okay, so you hit the ground running. And you and I are about the same age. It's different times about like getting agents and managers, but what was your first step? Was your first step to get into an acting class or a program, or was it, how do I get an agent and manager?
Yeah, I think I moved and I had no idea what I was doing. I'll just seem like exciting,
We'll figure it out when we get there.
Yeah, I got a couple of like jobs to support myself, which was a little difficult at 17. And then everything went wrong. I got in a car accident that wasn't a bad one, but I lost my insurance because of it. And I forgot like a few other like monetary things happened. And then I lost a job. So I just wound up going back to Texas for the summer. And I hadn't even tried to get an agent yet because I just didn't even know how to go about it. And so I went back to Texas for the summer and I did not want to go back to LA after that because it felt really fun and exciting the first time. And you read all those stories of like old Hollywood and you think you're going to get discovered at the drugstore or something.
Completely. That's exactly. I thought I would show up and I would walk into a 7-Eleven and my agent would just be there waiting for me. Right. And now we're going to start working. That's just how this works, right? Disneyland.
Yeah.
So then you went to New York, right? After
that was way later. So I went back to Texas and I had to come back because my stuff was in storage here. And that was the only reason. And I remember I drove back with my mom the second time and I was like, didn't want to come. And at that point, she was encouraging me because she was like, you already did, just go and might as well see. And then I was determined. So I went to the library and they had, because it was pre-internet being everywhere, and they had that book with the list of agents. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Absolutely. I use the same thing. Yes. Scroll down. I submit it.
And it shows all the clients that they have. And I was, which one's a good fit? And I picked a few of the small ones that I thought if I walked in, they would actually see me maybe. And so I walked into a couple of agencies with a picture that was like, "Hi, I just moved here from Texas and I'm 18." And I dropped it off and I got called back for a couple of meetings and got my first agent that way. And it was when they were making all the teen movies. So it was just like a lucky break that they were more open to an 18-year-old from Texas.
Yeah, because you got to do American Pie too. I know it's Girl at the Party, but did Girl at the Party get to contribute to anything, or did you just get to be on set and get your feet wet of, oh, this is how a set works?
I had one really embarrassing. It was funny. I had auditioned for like a role, like
a substantial,
not that substantial, because I don't think any of the female roles were very substantial, except for maybe the couple that started in the first one. But she had lines of dialogue and scenes, and I remember I went back into audition for the casting director for something else, and he pointed at the wall like excited, and he was like, "Look!" And he had given me that role, and I was like a bit like. So yeah.
Okay. So it's teen movie era. Yes. I want to know, especially since you're figuring it out as you go. I'm really curious. I've said this before, like you came on the scene for me. I remember going to Sundance and seeing Brick, but Brick happened, and that's Rain Johnson, and that's Joseph Gordon-Levitt. But did Brick happen before Everwood, or Everwood happened first? So I want to, because Everwood's also this big teen show. So you land on this. How does Everwood come to be? And I want to know like the actual audition process, because you specifically, and I've said this to you before, have such an innate stillness and quality that I think is really hard to teach. And you know that I coach actors and I work with actors. It's really inviting the camera into you. You have that effortlessly. And sometimes I don't even know if that can be trained. And in Brick, I felt like I watched that explode. So I'm curious if that was something that was cultivated earlier on, or if that's just naturally your essence. So I'm curious about the audition for Everwood, and then I need the Brick one.
Thank you. I think that's just me. If I'm honest, I think that's more my personality.
Yeah,
it's like it's that, or I'm a total spaz. So I don't know. I'm sure like the kind of more hyper side of me too, but I am a quieter person, and I tend to watch and listen more maybe. Everwood, I had done 2 pilots at that point that didn't go, and one of them did go actually, and then they got rid of over half the cast. They only kept 3 of us. And then they were auditioning people for ages. And then the whole thing just went away. I was
essentially testing at that point, which is a pretty heavy duty thing to do. So within a few years of being here, you're testing for shows.
No, I got them. We shot the pilot. I shot 2 pilots as like a regular, but then the second one got picked up to series, but then they got rid of most of the cast, and then they started retooling like the entire thing, like new writers, new this, new that. And then ultimately they scrapped it. But they did have to pay me, but they waited a really long time to pay me, because it was like, if you did something else in that time period, then they could get away with not paying you somehow. It
really?
It was such a weird thing. But then I did get towards the end of that I went in and auditioned, and they were lovely. And it seemed like I was going to get it, but then it turned out that the network had actually already pretty much offered it to somebody without the showrunners approval. And so then I found out I didn't get it, but then that person went, and then they wound up swapping us out. And so I was very lucky to go and do that, because I really thought that was like such a lovely show.
And even the process. Okay, so I want to take it back a little bit, because if you were testing and getting series regulars at this time, and this is your young 20s at this point, right? Early 20s?
Yeah, 20. I think I got Everwood when I was 20, turning 21, maybe. Then the other 2 pilots when I was like 20.
Do you feel like it was, I want to know, and I'm not discrediting your talent because it's incredible. I've watched you work, but do you think it was beginner's luck coming into these series regular jobs, or were you working with somebody to understand? Because series regulars, you get 3-4 scenes right away. You're responsible for this character for the arc of the season. Now I know one went as a pilot, one didn't, but the audition processes for that, do you think it was more beginner's luck and like the pressure wasn't there, so you really didn't know what it was? Or were you in preparation for that sides of responsibility?
No, one thing I'll say is that I was always terrified by auditions. I still am terrified. I have to take the beta blockers a lot of times. And so for me, it's funny, everybody else has been really upset about the switch to tapes. And I do miss going in the room when it's really going to be a work session with the director, because those suck over Zoom. But I don't miss it entirely because, and I miss getting direction, because sometimes you're making tapes and you just feel like you're sending them into this black hole. We've talked about that a lot. And you're like, are these even being seen? What is happening? And I feel like a lot of the jobs I've gotten since COVID, since the strike, were offers, which is concerning. Do you know what I mean? When weren't based on a tape or based on a meeting or anything.
But that speaks to your reputation. I say this on the podcast all the time. And I say it when you started technically working 2000, early 2000s, you're at that 20 plus year marker. You have built a reputation. So offers are coming in. People have worked with you. They want to work with you again. They know your work. They want to work with you again. But at the beginning, when you're trying to just get anybody to realize who you are or trust you, do you think it was the age, or do you think it was you were already really prepared in a zone of, because like you said, it's nerve-wracking for you, but somehow you land the job?
I think that it was a couple of things. I think that one, I think you are like to some extent innately who you're going to be as an actor. I don't think that many people start off like just naturally garbage and get to be very good. Like they can be okay. You can be okay, right. I think, but I think you have to have a feel for it or not. Like, I think it's definitely at least a little I think it's a lot of what you naturally, and I do think there's something to, I moved around a lot as a kid, and I was starting new schools, and I was taking in different people, and I was observing different people. And I think I've always thought that plays a role in it. And I was an only child, and so I don't know. I think I sometimes felt like I was playing a character. And then I think that it was easier. I think it was 1,000,000% easier. I think that when you're young, the competition isn't quite the same. There were a ton of roles at that time. People are always like excited about somebody young and new. And it was just easier.
I appreciate you saying that. I do think, and I just think for newer actors that are starting now in today's landscape, you're starting with a self-tape. You're not getting to meet somebody in person. Mm-hmm. So you have to build a reputation by consistently showing good work in self-tapes. But it's changed in a lot of ways. Look, you and I being a certain age, 20 years ago, we weren't seeing women leading shows that are in their 40s and 50s. Now that's all we see. So thank God the landscape's changed, because 20 years ago, it was mostly teenagers or these young like the YA dramas, Party of Five, 90210, Melrose Place, like all of those. And also the way that the world looked at things, right? Television was this thing like commercials, like you can get television, but what do you want to be? A television actor? Do you want to be a film actor? Yeah. And you and I have talked about this before, but did you want to do television or did you want to do film?
I wanted to do film.
Yes. Right. And then
because it was so different, even though there were, when you actually look back, I think there was so much good network TV in comparison. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Because I think when cable happened, network TV for the most part, there's still some great shows. I've worked on some of them. But it changed. There were some really great quality TV shows, but it was like, if you were a film actor, you were a film actor. If you were a TV actor, you were a TV actor. And they rarely crossed. As Nicole Kidman doing like one limited series after another. That would never have happened. And so I really wanted to do film. And I made probably a lot of weird decisions then based around the fact that I wanted to do film and I didn't want to do TV so much.
That's a great. So after getting on Everwood, after this, you land this job. Is the exposure for you to have more film open at that point? Or is at that point, is it mostly television that is coming in?
No, I really think it was just such a different time though, still, because you're young and you just have a lot of opportunities. And there were so many movies being made then, you know, it was such a different landscape for that. And so, no, I had a lot of opportunities. Like I left Everwood because I tested for Mean Girls for the Rachel McAdams role. And I had to, for whatever reason, wrap that just to even test for it. For some reason, I had to leave Everwood. It was this weird thing that they needed to know I was available or something like that. And I was very upset about that because I was like, why? But I was also, truthfully, it was one of those things where you don't work very much. You work one day a week. And I was in Utah and I was miserable. I've never been like being on location for long periods of time when I'm not working very much. Like I don't know what to do with myself. So it wasn't the healthiest for me, but everybody was really lovely and I was very grateful to have that job. So tested for Mean Girls, didn't get it, which they also were like, yeah, Rachel McAdams test, because I think she had just done The Notebook and it hadn't come out. And they wanted her. And that was the thing. If she agreed to test, if they did her test deal, she was going to get it. And so I was like, so wait, I'm leaving a job to go test for something I'm not going to get. And so sure enough, I didn't get it. I also wasn't a great test. I just remember I flew in from Utah. I was staying with a friend. It was really loud. I didn't sleep. I brought one shirt. It was like sweaty. I smelled. It was
all of the things.
The popular girl. And I was like short, like pixie hair then. I just didn't. I didn't look like the popular girl at school for sure.
Did you feel like the test dummy? Because I want to talk about test dummy here for other actors in testing situations, or at least earlier on. If a studio or a network or somebody really wanted one actor, there has been times in which they'll bring in other actors that are either so not right for the part or just in a different zone, right? So then they can position themselves to have the choice that they want. Do you feel like Mean Girls was a setup in that regard?
No, I don't actually. It's possible. I think like I did a really weird take on it. And
what was your take? I love when this is great between us, because Nora and I will sometimes audition for the same things. And Nora's always, I gave it a different weird take. And I'm like, I don't think it's a weird take at all. It's just so, we have different instruments, right? Like we're different. So I love your take.
There was this girl on America's Next Top Model who at that time, and I just found her cadence so funny. Everything was like this, and it was just like this. And it wasn't that, but it was just this very deep droll.
Yes.
And it was, I don't know, it was just so weird.
No, it was your influence. So so you did the voice thing for your version?
It was, it was like some sort of strange, I have no idea. But I don't think that it was like I was just there for no reason, but I think they didn't think they were going to necessarily get her. And then, but once that was for sure that she was going to test, then maybe I became a test dummy.
I just want to like people know that exists sometimes that they
for sure. And,
and you're not privy to that information usually till much later. Like you find that out later, and that's why I think with this podcast or just in general, like it's not personal. It's not like they're trying to set you up to fail but they're selecting what they want for the project. It's not rejection. And I always say it's selection, not rejection. So they're selecting who they want. They can position certain things because they have to get a lot of people to approve. And that was a big movie at that time. So I'm curious. So you couldn't go back to Everwood. They couldn't call Everwood back and be like, hey, she didn't get Mean Girls. Do you guys want to keep it going? What was the next move?
I think that's a thing of Everwood was, if you want to get cleared for this time, then you're not coming back. I think it was a whole thing. And it's funny, that was the first test I did not get. Because up until then, everything I had tested for, I got.
How did you recover from that? Because that's why I don't like talking to people unless they have at least 10 years experience, because you might come out the gate and have, I don't want to say luck, preparation, opportunity, things are going a certain way. And then all of a sudden you hit this moment where you're like, wait, it's not always going to be my part. It's not always going to be this. So how do you recover from not getting that part?
I was very much told I was not going to get it. So it was what it was. And I also knew I did not kill that test. The other ones I knew I did. Like I came in and I like killed it. And that one was a mess. Like I definitely beat myself up a lot for that one. There was a scene. So there were the scenes that I tested with Lindsay Lohan for. And then, but then there was another, and those were my audition scenes that I had done on the tape. But then there was another scene with the other girls. And that was in the thing. And I, for some reason, hadn't paid attention to it because it was like a line here and there were a bunch of girls, but they were, and I think I didn't for some reason realize I was going to be there with those girls swapping out around me. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know my lines. I did not know my fucking lines. And that is mortifying. That is fucked up for everybody. Do you know what I mean? But it happened and I learned a very big lesson. I have nightmares about stuff like that. So it was a weird.
And do you think you didn't learn your lines, or do you think just the causation? Like sometimes we have bad days, right? You were asleep.
I think it was both. It wasn't that I hadn't looked at it. I hadn't worked on that scene as much because I made a little line there and there. And like, it's not a big deal. But sometimes when you're in those scenes with a bunch of people talking, and obviously those girls were off because those were their scenes. And I just thought I could look at my scene. It was just a little bit of a meltdown moment.
Yeah. And I like that we can recover from that. Not all auditions are going to be great. Not all projects are going to be great. I have a little notebook that after each tape and stuff, sometimes I watch them back a couple weeks later and be like, well, I could have done this better. Yeah. I could have done that better. This is an ever evolving craft that we're doing, and it pressure situations. So then you learn, how do I work best so that next time I do it a little bit different or a little bit better? What's the next couple auditions that come in after Mean Girl? Because once you have a situation like that, mm-hmm. I always like to see how we bring it into the next.
So I had auditioned for Brick, I think a couple of months before that, maybe.
Really?
And they were like, in the room, it was just me and Ryan at Shannon Canyon, the casting director, at her house, because she cast out of her house. And it was great. It felt like we were just playing, and it was such a lovely meeting audition process. And I had heard that, yeah, I was his choice, but then they're like, well, but we're going to make some offers. And so I think there was an offer out to Misha Barton for a long time, because that was big OC time.
Huge time. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if they went to anybody after her. I think that was the one. So I thought that they were going to offer it to me, and then they offered it to her. And I was like, oh, okay. And then they came back to me, and it was right when I guess I hadn't gotten Mean Girls. And so my schedule was open because I wasn't on Everwood anymore, because it shot basically at the same time as Mean Girls. And so I got to do that.
You had to do Brick. So now Joseph Gordon-Levitt is an unknown at this point. He's the
TV show. Yeah.
He's on the Disney show, right? But yeah. Brick's how was working with Ryan, or what did you learn from Brick that you brought into the next one? Because at that point, I feel like you don't stop working. That point, once Brick comes out, from my perspective.
But yeah, no, Ryan was just amazing. Like I think there are those people who, in the same way actors are just naturally gifted to be directors. And he had been making shorts and doing things for a long time, and had gone to USC and film school. But I just remember what a lovely process the whole thing was. I remember the first rehearsal with him and Joe in his apartment, and he made us lunch, and we rehearsed, and I was just like, oh man, this is going to be something, because the script was very different to have the high schoolers speaking like they're in like a Dashiell Hammett novel. Mm-hmm. And you go, this could be really bad, or it could be good. And that rehearsal, I was so excited afterwards, I remember. And then when we actually got down to San Clemente to shoot it, and I saw the production design and the cinematography and everything, I was just like, oh, this is great. And everybody was so great for their roles. And it was one of those things that it was a great moment. It felt like summer camp. Like everybody hung out in the weird shitty motel, whatever that we were in, and played guitar, and it was just great.
So just so people can understand the lineage too of something like Brick. When did you guys shoot that? 2001 or two? Because it goes to Sundance 2000.
It was, yeah, it was a big gap. We shot it around, I remember we stopped for Thanksgiving. So we started in November and finished in early December. It was a short shoot though. It was 18 days.
Really? Because at that time, movies were having a lot more. Now that's average.
Oh, the indies, yeah. I think it was an 18-day maybe on film too. So that makes it slower. And then we did 2 pickup days later. So I think
That was it.
I think so. I could be wrong because my memory is not what it once was.
But once you shoot it, a couple years to get to Sundance, goes to Sundance, which is a huge deal. If you go to Sundance now, if you went to Sundance 20 years ago, I'm curious.
It released for a little while after that. Like it came out in 2005, and I believe we shot it.
The TV and film landscape, it's constantly changing, but traditional actor training has largely remained the same.
It's focused on a theater model whose main goal is to help you stretch the expression of your instrument. That's why you can have years of training,
From scene study classes to audition classes.
to even an MFA, and still not be able to book a 2-line co-star.
That's why we created The Bridge for Actors.
A collection of tech, craft, and business online courses to teach you the skills that you need to go from a student of acting
To a working actor.
Did we shoot it at the end of 2000? No, we shot it at the end of 2001, I think is what it
That's
was.
what I thought, right?
2003.
What I'm just pointing at is that every level of this industry, it's like you feel like, okay, I'm going to get on the TV show, right? Oh, okay, now all these opportunities are going to come. Oh my gosh, I'm going to do a film. It's going to go to Sundance or it's going to go box office. Oh, okay, I'm going to get some more relevancy for that. Just seeing the duration and timing between stuff before things actually hit and how you're able to parlay that. So after Brick comes out, then you is it kind of great? Like you have a nice run before, you have Heroes, 2006, and then Grays right out on the heels.
No, that wasn't it. I was like, I feel like I had a year and a half of not working between that, or a couple of years. I mean, I did maybe something or another, but yeah, there were a couple of years because I think I was 28 when I did Grace.
Yeah, I remember when they brought in all the interns and it was such a big deal. So I would love to know the audition process for that. Or even before we get to that, what do you do in these valleys? Like you say, where it's been a year and a half between this project and this project. You've been a consummate working actor, but there's highs and lows to that. So what is your survival mechanism between projects, between time and space when you're actually on set and working?
Oh, don't spend any money.
Right.
It's like, I don't know what else you do. I just joined a gym. I'm trying to go to the gym now. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard not knowing when you're going to work. It's great when you know you have something to go to. And so you're like, okay, I can enjoy this time a bit. I've always said like the greatest moments of my life are when I've gotten a job before I start the job. Do you know what I mean? Like when you have this thing where you're like, oh my God, I'm so excited. I got this thing. And you have a month or two or something before it starts. And you're like, I can relax. Like I can, because even though we have all this free time as actors, it's hard to enjoy it. You know? I find it very difficult to relax and enjoy it and make the best use of it. But yeah, and then I start a job and I'm like, oh my God, I'm awful. Everything's terrible. And blah. And then you get to the end and you have a few good days where you're just like, when the job's over, I'm going to sleep in. I'm going to do this. And then like within a week, I'm like, I got to get a job.
Are you the type of person that once you're on a job that you're looking for the next one immediately? Or like you just said, does it take a couple weeks after you come off the job and then you're scrambling for what's the next thing going to be?
No, it's both.
Yeah. Yeah. I just think as actors, we're so conditioned to seek that once we find what we have been seeking, that it's hard to turn off that seeking missile.
Yeah, for sure.
You don't know what the next thing's going to be. And I just want to read, because for people that are listening, Everwood, then Heroes, Grey's Anatomy, Southland, Mad Men, Common Law, Grimm. These were huge shows. Astronaut, Wives Club. Like you're bouncing, you're going, you're rolling. But I want to point out, like then Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and The Right Stuff. But during this time, you're seeking to be in more film still. Or at some point, are you transitioning, being like, great, it's television. This is wonderful. How are you balancing when you're trying to grab for film? Or do you still feel like that's slightly out of reach because you've also done
To be
films?
honest, like I got dropped by CAA when I was 20. I had gone with my agent from Gersh, who I loved being at Gersh, and I went to CAA with him when he went. And
What era was this around when you, after Everwood?
No, I was with Gersh until I was 27, maybe. I think I was about 27. And I hadn't done a ton the past year or something like that. But I went to CAA with him, and we were really close. But when he went to CAA, he just dropped me on other people who were lovely, who I really liked. But then there was a whole thing, and I almost left because I was just like, I think this agency is too big for me, which it was at that moment. And and then they had this thing where they made a whole drop list when William Morrison and Endeavor merged, and they dropped a bunch of clients. They were like, well, we'll drop some clients too. And it was so strange though, actually, because that year that I was with them, I tested for like everything they sent me. It was between me and somebody else for like huge things. And so I had actually gotten a pilot, which I then got fired from, which is the only time that's happened to me. I got hired.
Can we pin for a second? And I need to, because everybody's got a good firing story. I need to hear.
So I got hired for this pilot, and I went through the process. It was funny because it was a half hour, and I didn't really do half hours. So it was like, I was jokes on them. It was like the end of pilot season. I was like, pilot season's over. I didn't get anything. And they sent me this half hour. And I went in, and I remember like, it was a producer session, and I waited for 2 hours. Like, there were so many people there because I think it was starting really soon, and they were really trying to find these last characters. And I went in and read, and they loved it. And I was like, oh, and they immediately asked me to test. And I was like, okay, cool. And I went through the testing process and felt like I sailed through it. Like, they never had any notes for me. It was one of those things where you're just like, okay, cool. And it was like an amazing cast of like just the funniest people. And so we did a table read. We'd had a pre-table read before the network came in, and we did the pre-table read, and Brett Ratner was directing it. It was his first pilot that he was directing. And so he was like, guys, this is all wrong. Because everybody was like trying to outdo each other. And I was a straight man. And the comedy came from like me being straight. And so it was much smaller than everybody's. And he was like yelling at everybody else. And I was like, what about me? And he's like, you're perfect. Don't change a thing. So I was like, okay. So then we were waiting for the network to come in for the real table read. And the actor sitting next to me is, I have to go to the bathroom. And he's like, I'm afraid I'm going to go to the bathroom while when everybody comes in or something. And I was like, it's fine, go to the bathroom. I was like, what are they going to do? They're not going to fire anybody. We start shooting in 2 days. And I fully said that. I was like, they're not going to fire anybody. And he goes to the bathroom. He comes back, and I'm just like, and they're taking forever. They're so late. These network executives are so late, and I have to pee at that point. And I'm nervous. That doesn't help. So I was like, fuck, I'm going to go to the restroom. So I go to the restroom. I walk back in. Everybody's seated. They've introduced every cast member. And as I'm like sitting there, and that's Nora. And I'm like, hi, it's me. And I sit down, and I'm at the furthest end of the table from them. And everybody totally disregarded what was said to them about not being too big. And they like really do it up. And I'm doing my little thing at the end. And we leave like it's done. And I go to dinner with some of the cast. And slowly people start getting texts that rehearsal was canceled the next day. And they're like, oh my God, I think somebody's fired. And I just remember looking around the table and being like, which one of these is not like the other? Like, I was like, it's gonna be me. And I walked to the garage, and I still hadn't gotten a text. And I walked to the garage, and one of the guys from the show was walking with me, and I get the phone call from my agent
At CAA, at this point, you're still with CAA,
Yeah.
right? Yep.
that you're fired. The showrunner tried to they all tried to fight for you, but and it was crazy though. What's so crazy to me is that I tested the day before.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you
Yes.
saw what I did in a better context the day before, and then and it's crazy because they still have to pay you, by the way.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They're always like, we don't have money, but then they're doing weird things like this.
So you land there. Okay. And then how long afterwards?
Do I get dropped?
Yes. I mean, but I'm grateful that you're so honest about this, because talk about peaks and valleys. Like every time you get to a certain level, you're like, yes, things are going to get easier, but every level has its different set of circumstances and challenges, and things get shuffled around. And again, it's not personal, right? Yeah. It's money. They're worried about the show going forward. Yeah. I'm curious the recovery after that, and then into the drop of CAA.
Yeah. So I think I got dropped like a month later.
Nora. Okay.
It's okay. Everybody gets fired. Annette Bening got fired. This person got fired. Everybody gets fired. The agents are saying this to me. And I'm like, okay. And then, I get dropped. And it's a nightmare time to get dropped because everybody's already scrambled to agencies from William Morrison Endeavor. Mm-hmm. And so I'm getting like a couple of, let's see. And then, but there's one agency that's like chasing me through like friends and whatever. And I'm like, I'm going to go there. So I went there, and I have to say it was just like a really abrupt change for me. I never got movie scripts anymore.
Was that APA? It was APA, right?
It was.
Yeah. I had a feeling.
They were good with TV, like network. And I think that's a great place if that's what you're doing. But it wasn't what I wanted to do. And so that was tough for me.
Yeah, that's, again, I think the longer you're here, you start to realize the powerhouses, what they control, what they're able to do. Gersh, APA, Innovative at that time, Endeavor that got swallowed up. They were more television centric.
I found that Gersh did a really good job for me for film.
Film as well. Great.
Yeah, they did at that time. I don't know how they are now, but so I felt like everything changed a bit. But I will say that like when I'm angry or like when I'm whatever, I'm like, I'm going to get a job. So I got like within a month the Grey's job.
APA. So APA came on board and Grey's came immediately after.
Yeah.
That's the thing. Peaks, valleys. You go from the valley. Okay, well, how do we swing back up and grab a job? Because that's the thing too. I think when people get fired, it's hard to not let it go to you personally, and you have to stay above that so that you can be available for the next job that's coming in, so you don't implode for your career.
Well, I will say though, it definitely really fucked up my confidence being fired and then being dropped, because those were like things that happened. So in Grey's is a tough set, and it's not a place to go in with no confidence. So that was like tough for me. Like it wasn't great being there with no confidence. Like it definitely didn't make me a better actor. I was like anxious all the time.
And on Grey's, when you signed on for that, was that supposed to be a reoccur that could turn into a series regular? Because I feel like that was a testing situation. It was a different kind of testing situation for a bunch of different actors.
Yeah, it was like you signed up for 3, and then after every 3 you got like a bump in pay, and then there was the option to be a regular the next year.
And you ended up doing 9. So you feel like in that situation, with your confidence not being at the place that it was, do you feel like it was storyline related, or it just felt like it was not?
I think it was all of it. I think what was I going to say? Our storyline got totally changed because Katie left for maternity leave suddenly, and it was like a love triangle. And then somebody else had to leave suddenly. That kind of changed my storyline. And so that was like given to somebody else. The storyline thing was a thing, but then I just think maybe I didn't fit in. I don't know. I had a really bad experience on my second or third episodes. I think it was the second episode. And it was this one that took 3 weeks to shoot because it was told from everybody's point of view, and you had to keep shooting the same scene over. And the director of that She was like one of the nastiest people I've ever worked with in my life, which I like have no problem saying because she was so awful to me. She was such a bully and I was so nice. And I think that she couldn't pick on anybody else. So she decided to pick on me. She would say things to me all the time as though I had never acted. And this isn't a play, honey, or this isn't, just crazy.
Condescending feedback. Yeah.
She was, I remember at one point, one of the cast members like stood up for me because she was being so mean. There was like, I was doing a scene. I was like, was that okay or something? And because I was just so insecure. And she was like, we can only spend so much time on it. It was like that with her. And when I just started on this thing and my first episode went fine. And then after that, like my confidence was just like, I would go home and cry after set, like that episode. So it was a weird thing. So like when I was done, I was relieved, to be honest. Like I was just like, and I moved to New York then because I was just like, I just need a full reset. And I felt so much better when I left.
Did you? I'm glad because that's what my question was going to be. What was your recovery? So going to New York, changing it up. Had you seen a lot of the casting directors in New York yet? Or you were just starting a new reputation with all new offices?
I knew a couple of them who had always been really nice to me, but yeah, I didn't know most of them. And they didn't know I was there for a long time because APA didn't have a New York office and at that time. And it just was a weird thing. So I was just making tapes and sitting to LA. And then I was there for 4 years. And my fourth year, I finally was really getting traction there and starting to get into the indie world, and casting directors knew I was there finally. And then I moved back. It was such a weird choice.
We always did a project move you back, or you just decided you were just done with New York weather?
It was a polar vortex winter and they were doing construction on the apartment next to me. And it was such a nightmare. And I think I came to LA in the middle of the winter and I was just like, and somebody I knew was going out of town for work for 6 months. And so I decided to rent her house and I hated it. And I thought, this is just because it's not my house and I don't have my stuff and something. And so then I went ahead and moved all my stuff back to LA and regretted it. And then it's really hard to move back to.
I think we're always building, right? Yeah. We're always building in the zone that we are. And that's the other thing too. I was talking to my daughter about it this morning because she made some changes in her play. And I'm like, everything's always evolving as an artist. You think that you're going to make this choice over here and it leads you down this path for a little bit. And you might miss the other path that you could have made a choice to do. But as a creative, we kind of have to go through these experiences so that next time, like there was times, after I did True Detective, I was offered 3 reoccurrings. All I wanted to do was television, but I had attached myself to a stupid movie. Mm-hmm. Now, anybody that comes to me and asks for advice, it's know the lane that you want to be in so you can make good decisions. But we can only make those decisions in retrospect, usually once we've already gone through a moment of what we deem making a bad decision. But like you even said, you wouldn't have been available for Brick if you'd gotten Mean Girls. Like we can play this game of chess.
Yeah.
But truly, at the end of the day, I always think what's for you finds you no matter what. And we have to navigate these terrains. It's always peaks and valleys. And it's when you're at the peak, you know how things stick. And then you know that a valley's probably going to follow it up until you get to the next peak. So that leads me to your last project, this last audition, because right now times are different. I think people are having frustration around sending tapes into the abyss or not getting the appointment to send the tape. And because casting directors are limited in the amount of people that they can see. But not only that, we just don't have the same amount of content that we had before. 20 years ago, there was a lot more content, which doesn't feel accurate because of streaming. I'm so curious because I've talked about this before on mic. We're all in a group text. We all know when certain auditions are happening and not happening that are in our contemporaries. How Grosse Pointe Garden Society, none of our contemporaries, nobody else really got the audition. So how did this?
It was because it was for like mid-30s.
Yes.
And I think on that. So I don't know. Yeah, but nobody actually read for any of the roles. That was strange.
None of them. So I'm so curious, especially because this was in a time too where you were shifting your representation again. Will you talk about that audition process?
Yeah, that was just a funny one. Like I went to a friend's birthday drinks, and it was just like a very small birthday drinks. And she said, "Oh, Nora, do you know Bill?" And I was like, "Oh yeah." And he was like, "Yeah, we met a long time ago through our friend Josh, like 15 years ago or whatever. It's been like that long since we've seen each other." And I was like, "Oh yeah." And we chatted for 5 minutes, and he was like, "How's work?" And I was like, "Oh, work is not easy for anybody right now." I was like, "I don't think anybody's busy." And I was like, "How about you?" And he's like, "I'm really busy." And I was like, "That's great." Doing or anything. Like, I'm so not good at any of that. I just, even if somebody tells me they are doing something in casting, I just check out. I just am like, I'm not going to do the thing. And there's nothing wrong with doing the thing. It's just not in my, it's just
not in your demeanor to push to get something.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So the next day I got an audition and was like, well, this can't be a coincidence. Like, he must have called me in for this thing. And so I made the tape and I got the job. And he apparently told me later that he was like, yeah, he was like, the whole time I was talking to you, I was like, oh my God, she's perfect for this role. We've been trying to find it for a few weeks. And he was like, and called everybody the next day and was like, why haven't we seen her? She's perfect. And then he was like, and then your audition was like perfect. So it wasn't like we just gave it to you either.
No, you earned the part. Yeah.
But I think that's the thing. It's so hard right now, I think, to get a job that it's sometimes you need that extra thing.
I think so. I do.
Like, that's what I mean about sending the tapes into the abyss versus gotten offers for things. Because you send a tape, and I feel like I've made some tapes. I've made some ones that are good, but I've made some that I'm like really proud of. And when I don't hear something on those, I'm just like, what is happening behind the scenes that I'm not? It's so frustrating that like you've made those tapes where you just go, and half the time they already have an idea of who they want, and they're.
I was just going to say, I think at a certain point too, even if we're making great tapes, like we can take the scenario that you just talked about, Grosse Pointe, Garden Society, and I'm sure a lot of other great actresses made great tapes too, but you have this personal connection. He sees you outside of the realm of work, right? At that time, you are perfect. So you get the part versus somebody else sending in a tape. Sometimes it is that personal connection. That's why I always emphasize, especially at the beginning of starting your career, it's not the job that you're interviewing for, it's the career that you're interviewing for. So that in 10 years and 15 years, when you're sitting at a dinner party, it's like, oh yeah, I remember your audition. You were great. I'd love to see you for this. So it's a slow burn, and we have to leave things up to chance and up to circumstance and just stay the course. What would you say is your best advice that you could give yourself earlier on in those valley moments? Because you've never stopped working. There might be some spaces, but you're still working. You just had 3 movies come out this summer. 2 movies, 3 movies. We got some movies coming out. Blood for Dust, right? Yeah. Boneyard.
And then the other one, Monster Summer.
Monster Summer. So
I think that, what's funny though, those were all done over COVID, 3 years of COVID, and then they're just all coming out now. But I think that I would say don't be precious. I think that I was too precious at times, or had too much of an ego. I was too concerned. I was thinking too much instead of just being like, I should just do what people say it's okay for me and work, and just like
when
work.
You mean be precious, were you saying no to auditions or no to certain projects? Both. Mm.
A lot of auditions.
You were saying no to a lot of auditions that you wish if you were to go back, you would say yes to them now.
I think certain things, I think I just got in my head about a lot of things. I can get in my head or just be like, I'm just not right, or I'm not going to this or that. There's a lot of that for me that I've had to try to get better about. But at the same time, not be so hard on myself and enjoy it and have fun and do what you want to do with the character, with the audition process, with the role, it's so hard to believe in yourself when you're constantly told no. But I think that's what you have. You have to believe in yourself. And my therapist says that having to get rejected all the time and keep going is like a superhero power. Like, she's just like, that is like such a tough thing. Instead of letting it beat you down or comparing yourself, I think it's just really important to acknowledge what you've done. And
yes, I love that. I truly do. And the last thing I want to ask, and I know it's different for every role, but because you've self-professed saying I made this weird choice, or I made this odd choice. I don't ever think you're making weird choices or odd choices. I'm curious how you do prep for auditions? And it was different for everyone, but grab a hold of any of them. What's your preparation process to get ready to tape?
I learn my lines. I often make my mother run them with me over the phone.
Thanks, Mom.
Because I've never been able to just look at them and learn them that way. I have to say them out loud. And I use the Rehearsal Pro app sometimes to do it as well. But sometimes it's nice to just do it with a human being. And sometimes that's what family members are for, to
maybe not read with you on the tape, but just read and rehearse with you. Yes.
She rehearses with me. And then, yeah, for me, it's just trying to figure out a way in that makes sense for me. And then what are you going to wear? What feels right?
Do you normally go with voice? Because earlier we were talking about with Mean Girls, like you to figure out the cadence of how somebody's speaking. Is that something that is your auditory in that sense?
Yeah. And I have maybe a bit of like a softer voice and so just seeing, like, adjusting that sometimes lower or higher or stronger as much as I can. But yeah, and cadence is, because it would be weird, I feel like, if I just did every character the same, because it just wouldn't feel right. That's why sometimes it's nice when you do have an accent or something, because you just can immediately dive into something else.
Yes.
But yeah, I think that's it. But I don't have, because I didn't really study in a very intense way. I know people who have a process, and you see their sides and they're so marked up and they have all these different, but for me, it's just intuitive to what I see when I read it.
And I think that's been that way since the beginning. So as long as it's continuing to meet you that way, it works time and time again.
What do you do? What's your process?
It's different every time. So sometimes I go in with like patterns of behavior, or like how somebody walks or talks. I like to put behavior first. For me, that kind of really helps me sink into it. And lately I've been playing with music. I interviewed Selena Sleva years ago, and every character, she starts with music. And I think that's a fascinating tool to use once understand the story. It's what kind of music does this person listen to in the car by themselves? And from that, she crafts like the walk and talk and how they dress and stuff. And that's been really fun. Sometimes I like to just change it up so I'm not getting stuck in doing the same things. Because when I do the same tangible process every time, my brain wants to skip steps. I'm not sinking into it. So I try to feel like what activates me. Like when I was coaching somebody the other day and we were auditioning different backstories or even a wiring to this character, an understanding of this character. And nothing was activating her instrument. Nothing was like, oh, I feel that in my body. And then we hit on something where I was like, your husband and your kids, nobody sees you. And she instantaneously burst into tears. And I was like, that's the tool for you. Then that's your way in with that character. So I try to see where I'm affected, because I think our characters are affected. So when we're playing at something versus affecting our instruments, that feels like smacking to me. Whereas if I can find a way in to how they're built, that's what's fun for me.
I always think about how I relate to it too. Like the part of them that has commonality with yourself. And not that I'm trying to play myself by any means, but I think if you can ground it in that way, that's always been helpful to me.
Yeah.
Especially if you're playing something that is a bit more villainous or something that maybe isn't the most likable, to find the humanity, to find the things that you connect with is.
Yeah, I tell people a lot, and I do this for myself too. It's like whenever I go in for the judgment, I try to switch that out for justification immediately. When I read a breakdown and I'm like, oh, this character's bitchy, or oh, I'm not going to get this part. Oh, okay, hold on a second. I'm judging everything. I'm judging the material. I'm judging the character. I can't see anything. So if I can step into justification for behavior, that kind of helps me dig it out a little bit. So I love that. I love, and I've taped you here. I love watching how effervescent and just effortless you are in front of camera, and how not attached you are to the outcome. And I think that takes years of practice. No, of course you want to book the role, but I'm talking when you're actually working, when you're actually sitting in front of camera and doing that. And I think that is a beautiful trait, to be able to be open to see what comes through, and then to also walk away and let it go and be like, that's my take. That's whatever. And you do that all the time. And I hear that in your language constantly, which I think is really a beautiful place to be, where it's like, I had my odd choice. It's just, no, this is just Nora's choice. I don't think it's odd ever. I think I always love seeing it, right? When we get to audition for the same things, seeing our versions.
I love seeing yours. That's so fun to me, because then it always reminds you that it wasn't, if you don't get it, it's not you. It's not that you did a bad job. Because that's what I used to, when I walked into audition rooms and I walked out, I beat myself up constantly. And so it's so much easier for me with tapes, because I can watch them back and go, no, I did a good job. It's fine. But they wanted a different type. They wanted somebody who looks like Lish, not me, or who has her energy, because we could say things with the same cadence, and it would be completely different on both of us. And that's, I think, an important thing to remember. I have a friend of mine who is this beautiful, talented, very successful actress. And I just remember when I said something about the beating yourself up after auditions, and she was like, I don't do that. And I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean? When you don't get it, you're not like, why didn't I do this in the audition? Why didn't I do that? And she's, no, I just know I'm not right. Or there was something that was wrong. In that. And I just looked at her like there was something wrong with her brain. It was just like,
how do you have that?
What do you mean? Yeah. We could always be better, couldn't we? Like, I could always have done something better, or I could have looked prettier that day, or I could have, it's so dark.
It's dark. And I think that's a big part of why I enjoy teaching, is like really helping people not, even like I have a membership, the Bridge for Actors, really truly is taking you through that bridge of what is in your control, so you don't spiral out, so we don't take it personal, so we don't implode the next time we get an audition. I truly think a big part of this industry as a career, not a job, is us maintaining our mental health, truly, and not attaching to things. And, you know, a 25 plus year career that's still going, I appreciate your honesty and vulnerability, that we're constantly challenging those parts of ourselves. Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah, it was for somebody else. And I think a big part of that is seeing your contemporaries throw down the same material. That's why I teach from that perspective too. If you see 20 people do the same set of sides, do the same character, 8 out of the 20 are going to be really great, and 8 are going to take you in totally different ways. So now it's selection. Now you can celebrate other uniqueness. You can see the ability of what it's like to be the casting director and have a riches of choice. Mm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really true. I remember for that show that got picked up, but they were replacing all the people, I asked to come in and be the reader, to read with like the new people reading, because it's so interesting to be on the other side and to see what it, like people's energy, what they brought in and how much that matters. And because I'm like, I a mess when I would go into a room. Like I would get so nervous. Like I remember once I walked out and I walked into a closet. I was trying to get out the door and I walked into the closet in the room because I felt so stressed by the audition.
How did you come out of the closet? Did you make a joke about it? Because Sean Hayes, like, that's a known funny fact that like he literally got the part as he was walking out the door, and he was like, "Don't look at my ass." Like sometimes how you conduct yourself, or how we used to conduct ourselves in the room, would ultimately get us the job or not get us the job outside of the actual material.
Oh, no, for sure it can. And I've definitely gone into places and been like super charming, and it definitely helped. And I've also gone into auditions and just been so stressed about what was to come that I like didn't want to make small talk. And I wasn't like, and then when I felt like it had gone poorly at the end, I was just like, get me out of here. You know what I mean? And there was not a lot of personality. It was just like, okay.
But we all recover. That's the thing, I think, for nothing else, of people should be celebrating how they recover from moment to moment from these really high pressure situations that we put ourselves in, so that we can be available for the next thing. I already listed all the lovely, amazing things, but I just want to hit them again. Blood for Dust, Boneyard, Monster Summer, all percolating and coming to screens and streamings now. And then when is Grosse Pointe Garden Society supposed to start airing?
I think maybe mid-season, maybe later. I have no idea.
Okay, great. Yeah. And where can everybody follow along with you on Instagram?
Oh, Nora Zehetner. It's just Nora.
Just the name.
Just the name.
I adore you. Thanks for being open.
Also, I'm going to try and get you to run lines with me for 10 minutes when this is over. So there you go.
Yes, there we go. Yes, I'll do that. I'll be right back. BRB.
Bye. So good talking to you. You're the best one.
So good.